Many windows were smashed. The entire city went into fear. Stalin's own wife, who was in a building not too far away, went into shock and grabbed their son and rushed into the building. Such was the scale of the explosions. And as already mentioned, 40 people were killed and 50 injured in what is a busy square. Anyway, in terms of the robbery, it wasn't such a success for a number of reasons. Only a small amount of the notes that were secured were unmarked notes. Because of the scale of the size, many were the largest denomination notes, 500 ruble notes. And these were all marked and serial numbered. In short, they couldn't be used in Russia. And this was a major problem for the procurement and the securement of arms. And much of the money was whisked away in lined vests by different operatives. And Lenin launched a plan for how they could cash them. He sent many different agents to different parts of Europe, including France, Germany, London, etc., for these 500 ruble notes to be cashed. The intention was they should simultaneously all, at a given point in time, go into a bank and ask for them to be cashed. However, the Romanovs and the Russians had notified all of Europe of these marked serial notes. And many of the agents attempting to cash these notes were in fact arrested. Fascinating. Kamo, who had once cut the heart out of a man who was ruthless and known as Lenin's Caucasian bandit, was injured in the pre-test and drill of the explosion in his eye, but still participated in the robbery. He was later sent to a doctor from Russia in Paris to get his injuries attended to. What ended up happening is that doctor notified the Russian police, and he in fact was seized and arrested. So Kamo was seized and arrested. Amazingly, Lenin, through a lawyer visit, contacted Kamo's lawyer and told Kamo to behave as if he was insane, so that he could avoid being tried on grounds of insanity. Kamo went on a hunger strike, tore all his clothes off, pulled all his hair out of his head, and began eating his own excrement. Believe it or not. Yes, indeed. And he actually avoided being tried on the basis of insanity for a number of years and escaped later from his sanitarium. More to come on Kamo. And in fact, while we're talking about Kamo, the ruthless murderer and criminal, he later, once the revolution took place in 1917 and Lenin had overthrown and murdered the entire Romanov family and communism was now in power, when this became Lenin Square with Lenin's statue, Kamo had a monument to himself in Pushkin Gardens, not far from here. Later, after Lenin died, Stalin became the leader of Russia. And Stalin, of course, was the head of Russia during World War II. Interestingly enough, much later, Kamo, on his bicycle, was ridden over by a lorry and killed post the Lenin passing of Lenin. Many believe that it was potentially Stalin, because Kamo had so much information on Stalin of all these robberies and skullduggery and murder that had gone on in becoming the head of the Russian Communist Party and later the president of Russia. So what ended up happening is Kamo was killed and his monument was removed. Many theorize that it wasn't necessarily an accident. Who knows? Who knows? But Kamo, as Stalin was head of Russia, monument was removed. How ironic that the original burglars of a bank on this square later were commemorated in monuments in this same Georgian square, the capital of Georgia. An important note that I might have mentioned in other YouTubes that you'll see is that Stalin himself was a Georgian, and in fact his key enforcer and ruthless intelligence agent, the equivalent of Himmler, as he once described Beria to Roosevelt, his equivalent of Himmler, and for those of you not familiar, Himmler was the head of the SS in Nazi Germany, was also a Georgian. Many people say, and Russia invaded Georgia, both modern history in the 91 revolution and in 2005, etc., etc. Here you had a president of Russia, ruthless communist, who was the aggressive segment of a communist movement known as the Bolsheviks that came to power, that were Georgian, and the chief of police, the secret police and secret agents, also a Georgian, running and murdering Russians. Interesting footnote in terms of how one understands, coming from the place that is the cradle of Khazaria, killing and murdering beyond the Caucasus, where the Caucasians lay, where they had moved away from this region. So all of this is part of your Russian history and your Russian Revolution. But this story regarding the burglary on this square goes on and on. None of, apart from Carmo, who was caught in attending a doctor in France, who was a double agent for Russia, who turned him in, ever stood trial